to everyone. We welcome all to the Manage Krishi Gyandeep Knowledge Lecture Series number 17, which is being conducted on 12th August 2022. Manage organizes Krishi Gyandeep Knowledge Lecture Series by inviting eminent persons from varied fields of agriculture and development sectors to motivate and inspire the professionals working for agricultural development. And here we invite the outstanding personalities to share their life essence, their successes and difficulties that they came across, and what contributions they made to the field of agricultural development through live lectures to the faculty members of Manage Extension Education Institutes, Samitis, the state agricultural universities, and all the other institutes and developmental departments like Department of Agriculture, Animal Husbandry, Sericulture, Fisheries, Horticulture, etc. And also to the students of Manage from the leading institutions and networks. The faculty members are also invited. And these lectures are recorded as video films, and we are posting them on the Manage YouTube channel. And apart from that, we are also sharing these films with around 1 lakh extension professionals, both in India and also abroad. And today, we are very much privileged to invite Dr. Shakuntala Haraksingh Thilsted, World Food Prize Laureate of 2021, and presently ma'am is a global lead for nutrition and public health, WorldFish, Consultative Group on International Agricultural Research, and Vice Chair of UNFSS 2021. And today's topic is Aquatic Food Systems for Nourishing People and Nations. So welcome, madam. And now I request our Director General, Dr. P. Chandrasekhara, to welcome and introduce today's eminent personality.
Good morning to everyone here. I would like to welcome all the participants to this very important event. On behalf of Manage family, I would like to thank Dr. Shakuntala Haraksingh Thilsted for sparing her valuable time in spite of busy schedule and sharing her lifetime experiences with extension fraternity in this country. Thank you very much, madam, and I would like to welcome you to this talk. 1 minute about my organization. National Institute of Agricultural Extension Management is an autonomous organization under Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare. We work for strengthening agricultural extension systems in the country through training, research, consultancy, policy advocacy, international programs, education, documentation and dissemination, but also implementation of several Government of India programs. We have large number of extension workers who work with farmers in different parts of the country. We have 6.25 lakh villages, and these extension workers work with the farmers. It's very important to empower, enthuse, and inspire every extension worker with rich lifetime experiences of outstanding professionals from time to time. That responsibility is initiated and successfully implemented by Manage. This is the 17th talk series, and once the talk is delivered for the limited audience, that is converted into a film, and it reached more than 1 lakh extension functionaries and institutions in different parts of the country. It's my privilege and honor to introduce today's esteemed speaker, Dr. Shakuntala. She is the global lead of nutrition and public health at WorldFish, a CGIAR entity. She was awarded the 2021 World Food Prize for her groundbreaking research, critical insights, and landmark innovations in developing holistic, nutrition-sensitive approaches to aquatic food systems. The world is opening its eyes for nutrition-sensitive agriculture, but Dr. Shakuntala, she is ensuring nutrition-sensitive approaches to aquatic food systems which is unseen by majority of the extension functionaries. I'm sure that this talk will be very exciting and interesting for us. She is a member of the steering committee of the high-level panel of experts on food security and nutrition of the United Nations Committee on World Food Security and vice chair of the United Nations Food System Summit 2021, Action Track 4, Advanced Equitable Livelihoods, and also a food systems champion. In 2022, Shakuntala was appointed as co-chair of the EAT Lancet 2.0 Commission. Dr. Shakuntala holds a PhD from Royal Veterinary and Agriculture University, Denmark, and she also holds an honorary doctorate from the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences. With this brief introduction, again I take the privilege of welcoming Dr. Shakuntala to this Krishi Gyandeep Knowledge Lecture Series. Welcome, madam.
Greetings to all. Thank you, Dr. Shikara and Dr. Jaya, for inviting me today. I am truly happy to give the managed Krishi Gyandeep Knowledge Lecture today. Learning about the very many different groups of people engaged in manage, extension officers, the institute staffs and students, staff and former staff of many renowned institutions. I have selected 5 points for my talk. I will present each of these 5 points and illustrate them with examples from India. And then I look very much forward to having a rich discussion with all of you. The 5 points are: 1, paradigm shift in the global food and nutrition narrative, moving from feeding people to nourishing people and nations. Second, extension officers as food systems champions to transform food systems towards being nutritious and sustainable. 3, extension beyond borders, using digital tools to provide better and more relevant services to communities. 4, bridging traditional and new knowledge for food systems transformation. And 5, investing in the future and youth, building new capacity in extension services. Let me begin with the first point, the paradigm shift in the global food and nutrition narrative, moving from feeding people to nourishing people and nations. In agriculture, we are very focused on producing food to feed people and ensuring that they do not go hungry. This means that we have concentrated on the major food crops that give energy and fill our stomachs so that we do not experience hunger. India has been very successful in fulfilling this, with the tremendous progress that has been made in rice and wheat production and in feeding the ever-growing population. Now, we know that to have well-nourished people, we must focus on a diversity of foods and ensure that all people have access to diverse, nutritious, and safe foods that provide more than energy. The foods we eat must provide essential micronutrients, minerals and vitamins, and essential fatty acids, ensuring that all people, including women, young children, and the elderly, are well nourished and healthy. So, we must make a shift, not just focus on producing larger quantities of few staple foods, but transform our food system to include diverse, nutritious, and safe foods, and all the way from production to consumption. These foods must be culturally acceptable and accessible to all. As an example, I have worked for very many years on the consumption and production of indigenous small fish species and small fish species as superfoods for nourishing people as they contain multiple essential nutrients. So, this paradigm shift must also be people-centered. We must have a focus on people, not just the quantity of few foods produced. A people-centered approach to food systems must adopt nutrition-sensitive and gender-sensitive solutions and innovations so that food and nutrition security for all are met, especially the poor and vulnerable, women and young children, and no one is left behind. An example of this is from the state of Odisha. Small fish powder is included in the meals of children in Angawadis, and dried small fish is included in the take-home rations of pregnant and lactating women and adolescent girls. Right now, this is as a pilot, but there is great interest in the state to scale. A food systems approach must be holistic, ensuring not just food and nutrition, but also livelihoods and income for the very many people who are engaged in the food systems. And this includes, for example, informal food vendors. Also, now we know that increasingly we must be aware that food systems must be sustainable. Food systems must be nature positive and regenerative, not causing damage to the environment. And so it's not just about nourishing people, but also about nourishing our planet. The second point I wish to talk about is extension officers as food systems champions. How can we do this? Extension officers must be empowered to be champions of food systems transformation. And this must be at all levels, in the communities, at provincial, state, and national level. And we must remember that this must be holistic, not just one narrow part of the food system, namely production. So how can we go about this? Firstly, extension officers must seek to work broadly, not just on one crop, for example, rice. They must work across all foods that are part of the food system in the region in which they work. And they must form partnerships with other officers, not only from agriculture, but from other sectors, health and nutrition, education, water. An example again from Odisha. The fisheries sector is working very closely with the school sector. Small fish powder has been introduced in the school midday meal program, and the state is looking at ways to scale this information to many more schools. Now to the third point, which I have called extension beyond borders. Extension officers can make a huge difference in the way they work and the results they achieve by taking on the concept of think global, act local, and thereby break down present day's norms and barriers and develop new approaches to provide better and more relevant extension services to the communities in which they work. Importantly, they must make use of digital tools, for example, the social media and the internet, mobile phone apps to get better and easy access to more information. And they must ensure that the information they use is accurate and relevant for the communities in which they work. Extension officers must equip themselves with knowledge of new innovations and apply these to the food systems in the regions in which they work. They can make use of new methods from global platforms, drawing lessons from extension services across India, but also globally. An example of this. In all countries, including India, there is much concern as to how new technologies in food systems affect women's empowerment and women's engagement. The Women Empowerment in Agriculture Index, WEIA, is an innovative tool which has been developed to measure women's empowerment and engagement across the domains of agriculture. This tool can be utilized by extension officers to evaluate the effects of the interventions they are promoting on women's empowerment and women's engagement in the communities in which they work. For example, women's control over household income, the number of hours per day that women work. The fourth point I wish to draw your attention to is bridging traditional and new knowledge. And doing this for food systems transformation. Extension officers and extension services serve as a crucial entry point to bring scientific knowledge to community members. However, knowledge is not just a one-way flow from extension officers to community members. Extension officers must play a vital role in gathering, documenting, preserving, and integrating traditional indigenous knowledge and practices with modern approaches and technologies. For example, understanding seasonal patterns of planting and harvesting, when the ponds should be stocked, and also about food consumption. What are the seasonal differences in food consumption? They must also understand traditional methods to predict weather patterns and tides. Holistic indigenous knowledge must be sought, not just on production, but also on consumption, food preservation, and the consumption patterns of different gender and age population groups. In the Timor-Leste, as an example, a fish recipe book was developed, building on traditional knowledge of different fish species, the use of seasonal vegetables and spices in the recipes, and the knowledge of which population groups consume the different recipes and which benefits they achieve. The fifth and last point I wish to make is investing in the future and investing in youth. We all talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and the ways we should achieve this, but this has a time frame up to 2030, and this is much too short for our vision, because 2030 is just 8 years from now. We must look forward up to 2050 and to the turn of the century. This means that from now on, we must secure better and larger investments in extension services to bring in more youth and especially to bring in young women. services by agencies, research and teaching institutions, for example, manage the different arms of the government services, international institutions, such as the one I work for, WorldFish, and one CGII, and also the private sector must be strengthened. Some people question the value of extension officers and the extension services. However, we see today that extension officers and the extension services continue to be very relevant. In the wake of conflicts, climate change, and COVID-19, and the disruptions that these challenges are causing to communities, especially the poor and vulnerable, there is an urgent need to invest in a pool of multidisciplinary extension officers to serve communities and to ensure that our future food systems be nutritious and sustainable and accessible to all, leaving no one behind. I thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to address you today.
Thank you, Dr. Shakuntala. It was a wonderful, very brief but very concentrated talk. In fact, every word, it speaks volume. It came out of your experience. I would like to highlight one important issue which you've discussed at the end. Developing multidisciplinary extension workers. Probably in Indian condition, we have certain challenges. You are also aware. But if you have any international experiences, kindly guide us how to go about. See, we have agriculture department, horticulture, animal husbandry, fisheries, marketing separately. Funds are given separately, manpower is different, and their programs are different, and convergence is very limited. So the fisheries officer, he talks only about fisheries. So farmer is one, departments are many.
I started working in the state of Odisha just 5 years ago. And it has been such a tremendous way of working. And I have been so excited and continue to be excited because even though we have these silos of the different departments in the state of Odisha, and we will continue to have these silos. I don't see us breaking them down, Dr. Shikara, and making them multidisciplinary. But what we have done is break down the silo, or what the state of Odisha has done is break down the silos and continue to break down the silos between the officers that work in the different departments. So, for example, you heard me mention the work that fisheries is doing with the Laueate centers and with the school feeding programs. So these are officers, state governments at all levels getting together and working together in a team. So this is the way we have to go. And in any state in India, you also have state level, the central government level, and you also have international organizations. For example, UNICEF and World Food Program in Odisha, which are very much engaged in feeding young people, in feeding the poor and vulnerable, in nourishing people. So we have to form a convergence and work in groups with different officers, different staff at all levels. I said, I've seen this done in Odisha, and what's very surprising for me is the short time in which they have been able to do this.
India is now giving a lot of importance for fisheries. And in India, we have developed a National Fisheries Development Board for giving a holistic development of both inland and also captured fisheries, madam. Earlier in India, actually more production is come from the captured fisheries, marine fisheries. And now we have overtaken because of various intervention. Inland fisheries production is more in India. Okay, but actually, like crop production in inland fisheries, I am expecting some problem like monoculture. So most of the inland fisheries, people depend on only few katla, rohu, only one or two species. In future, you are talking about the sustainable production system. Whether it will lead to sustainability, though we could able to reach higher production in aquaculture. Second, actually, we have seen in Scampi, one species because of the viral diseases, entire thing has been devastated. So, do you have any international experiences where we have a different multi-cropping system? Same time we can increase the production. Second thing is, though we are in the globally, we are in number two. But if you see China and India's production productivity, there is a huge gap is there. So what are the, I think you might have been traveled extensively. So what are the good things we can learn from the China to adapt in Indian fisheries sector?
China is just one country you can learn from. There are many different countries that have good solutions and good approaches that you can learn from. So let me take 2 points. You talk about India is extremely proud and should be of the progress that it has made in shrimp production. And shrimp production, and very proud of the contribution of shrimp production to the GDP and to export. I talk about a holistic food systems approach. And I talk about focus on the poor and vulnerable. And we have seen now with COVID-19, if we do not focus on the poor and vulnerable, this group will grow. And we have seen this in India. And the issues that this group face for food and nutrition security, for livelihoods, for income, will bring down the development of the whole nation. And that can go really fast. So we must make sure that we have systems that are equitable and just, and leaving no one behind, and taking very much consideration to the poor and vulnerable, not only for themselves, but also for the development of the whole nation. And if I would talk a little bit about food systems and the shrimp production, a lot of the feed that's used in shrimp production comes from marine captive fisheries. And if you look at the value of these fish for nourishing people, then we should really consider how is it and the balance of how we use these small fish from marine sources for food, to nourish people, especially the poor and vulnerable, young children for their cognitive development, and then how we use this food, very nutritious food, superfoods, as a feed for the shrimp production, which is targeted towards export. I am not the one to say what India should do and what balance should be found in this issue. But this is something that must be considered if we want to talk about food systems for nourishing people, nourishing nations, and if we want to talk about the development of a nation and working on the concept of equity and justice and leaving no one behind. With respect to specific production systems, portrayed as the one who talks about one fish species, for example, mola, small indigenous fish species. And this really frustrates me. I don't think my concept is about one particular food. It's about diverse, nutritious foods. And what we have done with the food systems and the way we have worked in the last 50 years, we can see that our food systems have become less diverse. That means our production systems have become less diverse and our consumption patterns have become less diverse. Culturally acceptable foods, seasonal foods, the use of traditional methods, traditional ways to prepare food. Many of these have not been incorporated into the way we produce and consume food today. And we have to be extremely careful that we do not continue in that line and make our food systems, our production systems less diverse, with less consideration for seasonality, with less consideration for culturally acceptable production systems and culturally acceptable consumption patterns. So, for me, if you ask me what's a key principle throughout the food systems, it's diversity. And that's diversity in production systems as well.
So I am feeling say excellent. This is I can speak directly with the World Health person. I think this approach, people-centered approach, and food and nutrition security is the most important points I am taking from this madam. So we need to think our our strategic approach towards the global opportunity as well as the domestic opportunities. This is the my idea.
We have until now and continue to begin with production systems and what we produce. It would be really good if we can combine this with also beginning with consumption patterns and working back to production. So if we use these two approaches, not just one, but the one with the other, beginning with inputs to production, beginning with consumption patterns and working back, I do think we would come to better solutions. And I work in Odisha and Assam. If you would look at the consumption patterns of tribal populations, and tribal populations make up a large part of populations of many states of India, and look and learn from the traditional knowledge and the traditional patterns of food consumptions from tribal populations. There is much we can learn and apply to the mainstream systems of production and consumption and the holistic food systems which we want to strive to improve. So, and I haven't seen much work done with traditional communities, with tribal communities. And this is why I said, importantly for me, one way of moving forward is the combining of traditional and local knowledge with the new and modern technologies. We haven't done that properly, and we haven't made full use of that. I know there are many barriers. The first thing is, if you would work with the tribal communities, you have to manage with the language. Their knowledge is not like we know, reading a book, reading a report. Much of their knowledge is in storytelling. How do you ensure that you get the right knowledge and you learn from their storytelling? You learn from the words they use in their language. There is such a wealth of information that we can build on.
How we can address these two extremes? The malnutrition is equally rampant in both the cases, both in rural and urban areas. And whereas the D vitamin, for example, its acute deficiency is observed in most of the patients, those who are having this rheumatoid arthritis and all that. D vitamin C is very acute shortage. And it is well known that the fish diet will improve the D vitamin content among the human bodies. And how we can address this kind of vitamin or mineral nutrient deficiencies among the urban as well as rural areas?
First of all, yes, we can see, and it's alarming in India, and it's malnutrition on all counts. Those who are undernourished, and also in India, as in many other countries, there are escalating rates of obesity among the population. So these are quite long-term problems that are escalating, maybe already has reached the levels of alarm. What can we do and how can we do? And the interventions that are needed, the corrective measures that are needed are at all levels. So I talk about, and Dr. Shikara and I, we talked about the silos and the different groups that work within a nation on the development of a nation. I do think that working through the education system at the school level, at the very early age, with young children, can make a difference. And many countries have taken on this approach. Many countries in Europe, in the Scandinavian countries, have taken on this approach, focusing on building up good habits, good knowledge at the very, very start of the education system. My granddaughter, who is 4 years old, she goes to a kindergarten in Denmark. And she can talk to me about nutritious foods and about micronutrients. But in the kindergarten she goes at, and all kindergartens and nurseries in Denmark, children from a very early age, they must combine the foods on their plate at lunchtime. They must take the foods from the open table with many different choices. And there is one rule, that they must combine a rainbow plate. When she talks about food, she tells me about a rainbow plate, having many different colors, many different forms on her plate. She knows, she cannot talk to me about micronutrients, minerals and vitamins, but she can tell me about a rainbow plate. So there are many ways in which we can impart knowledge and build up good practices. And therefore, I do think that that is one entry point that we have not used. And then children can be agents of change in their homes with their parents. But of course, there are many other, this is just one example. There are many, many other factors. And when you talk about working parents, working populations, when you talk about issues as transportation, the amount of time it takes to get to and from work, and how that takes up the time that must be used for preparing nutritious, delicious, culturally well-known foods, meals, then I know that there's a big problem. In Denmark, with the knowledge that people have, they've seen that in young families, from Monday to Friday, that not much time is used in preparing meals, but Saturdays and Sundays, the time used for preparing meals have increased. So it's also an issue of priorities. How are you, the time you have at hand, at your disposal, how would you best use it? And I think we all know the scientific evidence and the stories we hear from people around us about the links between nutritious foods, nutritious diets, and non-communicable diseases, diabetes. I mean, I go to meetings in India and Bangladesh, and when we break from meals, I can hear around me how many of the participants are diabetic. it's exploding. So we must make changes, and changes at all levels. And it's never too late or never too early to start. As the example I gave with school children and even preschool children.
Are the inbuilt problems in the supply value chain, do you feel is there any scope for improvement of all these?
So, well, one thing I want to say that in looking at a holistic food systems approach and a people-centered approach, we should not only begin with production and inputs to production. The most powerful force and the most powerful group are the consumers. So if the consumers use their powers of what they demand and what they would like from the supply chains and from the production systems, this would be a really important opportunity to change production systems, to change the supply chains, to change the foods that are in the markets, because the consumers, the buyers, sit with the power. So they also sit with the power to choose governments and to choose governments to enforce the kinds of policies and interventions and programs that they need. So we as consumers, we who are at the end of the supply chains, we must use the powers that we have and the forces that we have in order to make sure that the food systems change from all throughout the very many different nodes, all the way to the inputs, so that we are not using, for example, chemicals in the production of our food. We are not using the use of fertilizers, how much fertilizers, which kinds of fertilizers we are using.
Mrs. Manisha Raut, she wanted to ask a question, but she couldn't come online. She is working as Assistant Director, Soil Conservation in Odisha. She says that, ma'am, is there any way to reduce anemia through low-cost interventions?
Many nutritional issues are multifactorial. A very, very good starting point is ensuring that the foods that people eat, and especially vulnerable population groups, young children, pregnant and lactating women, that the diversity of foods in their diet, culturally acceptable foods, include nutritionally rich foods and foods that supply many different micronutrients, vitamins and minerals. And there are the different states of India, there are extremely good examples of nutritious foods that supply different minerals and vitamins, including iron. And and also we know that on a plate of food, that there are foods such as green chilies, such as lemon, which many people use in their everyday diets, that they increase the bioavailability of iron and other micronutrients. So I would say a very good entry point is ensuring that the plate of food we eat is diverse and that we include different culturally acceptable seasonal common foods, especially from the groups of vegetables, fruit, and spices. So that is one way. But of course, there are many other different aspects of health and nutrition that can compromise people's state of nutrition. Illness, for example, right? But we know, I'm quite surprised, for example, with all that we have heard about COVID-19 and what we should do and all the issues that we have talked about and focused about with respect to vaccines, which of course is extremely important, that there has not been much more focus on the consumption of nutritious foods, boosting immune systems, because we also know our immune systems are extremely dependent on the types of foods we eat.
Thanks very much for very informative and very crisp session. It is like the words are enriched with a lot of meaning. And I would like to summarize, ma'am, that you spoke about very, very important 5 points. And you also spoke about few paradigm shifts and then few developmental initiatives that need to be taken by the development departments and every nation. And first paradigm shift that you spoke is about moving forward from feeding people to nourishing people and nations, and also the nourishing the planet. It is nutritious food started with all micronutrients, vitamins, minerals, and essential fatty acids, etc. And foods that are acceptable and accessible to the people need to be produced and consumed, and people-centered approach needs to be followed to adopt to the food systems. And food systems should be sustainable, and rainbow plate is a real innovation. Ma'am, children can be change agents for the adults and their own parents. And, the second point you spoke is that extension officers mostly focus on production, ma'am. Especially their outlook and focus is towards the production systems. But you said that they should be empowered as champions of integrated food systems and holistic food systems by collaborating with other departments and related departments. And third point that you spoke is extension beyond boundaries, wherein young extensionists, especially the young extensionists, should make use of the digital tools, especially the social media, mobile phone apps, etc., and ensure that information is correct and also relevant to the communities. So that information flow can be faster and more relevant for the communities. And you also spoke about women's empowerment and engagement. Very important point you highlighted, ma'am, that is not only the exogenous technology, but indigenous traditional knowledge is very important. That needs to be gathered, documented, and to be shared with all the communities. And it is not only just the production, but also the presentation, consumption patterns, and also you also shared the experiences from different countries. And the fifth point is investing in future and investing in youth to work towards sustainable goals. We need to secure better and large investments in extension for bringing more youth into extension, and institutions at local level, national level, and international level to be strengthened, and multidisciplinary extension officers you spoke about, ma'am. And you appreciated India's shrimp production and holistic food systems with focus on poor and vulnerable people, equitable and just, and leaving no one behind for the country's development. And ma'am, we felt that you mostly try to cover the diverse, nutritious, sustainable food systems for healthy nations and healthy world. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now I request our Director General to thank our esteemed speaker today.
Dr. Shakuntala, it was a very interesting discussion. Every word of yours, it was loaded with ocean of your life experience. I know 1 hour is very limited time, but it triggered many ideas for us. Thank you very much for sparing your valuable time. In fact, you talked about rainbow plate. We draw inspiration for working for rainbow extension that talks about convergence being an extension organization that gave us a, this idea. We will work for that. I would like to thank all the participants, managed family members, EI officials, Samiti officers, department functionaries, and especially many entrepreneurs in the fisheries field. They are also participating in this. I'm sure that this 1 hour talk is going to ignite the minds of 1 lakh extension workers in the days to come. Thank you very much for your valuable time. Hope to see you in Manage whenever it is convenient to you. Thank you very much. Namaskar.